I'll defend him." The words cut through the Manhattan courtroom like a blade, sharp enough to stop laughter in midair. Reporters lowered their phones, prosecutors froze. Even the judge paused with his pen hovering just above the bench. A young black woman stood at the back of the room, her apron still tied around her waist, a worn binder held tightly to her chest, as if it were a shield. Her name was Alana Reid, and no one in that chamber believed she had any right to speak. Certainly not for a billionaire. Certainly not here. At the defense table, Elias Carver, whose fortune once built empires of glass and steel, stared at her with a mixture of disbelief and anger. Moments earlier, his high-priced attorney had vanished without explanation, leaving him stranded at the center of a federal fraud case worth $42 million. The prosecutor was already smiling as she prepared to proceed without opposition. But Alana stepped forward anyway. If you believe dignity should never depend on wealth, and that courage can come from the quietest corners of a household, feel free to tap so this story can reach more people who need it. A murmur spread through the gallery as Alana walked toward the defense table, each step deliberate, grounded, and strangely calm. She was a maid, after all, someone the court expected to clean floors, not challenge legal arguments. Yet there she was, facing the judge with steady eyes. She explained that she once attended law school, but left to support her family, and for 4 years had studied economic crime in silence. She knew this case, she said, better than anyone in the room. Laughter flickered again, but this time it died faster. Something in her tone, a quiet conviction, carried weight. The judge took a breath, glanced at the empty chair where a lawyer should have been, and made a decision that would echo far beyond that morning. He granted her temporary permission to speak under close supervision, provided Elias agreed. Elias looked at her with disdain. "You scrub floors in my house," he muttered. "Not arguments in court." Alana answered softly, without lowering her gaze. "Someone is setting you up. Right now, I'm the only person here who actually wants to protect you." And for the first time that day, a billionaire found himself with no better option than to trust the woman everyone else had overlooked. The courtroom shifted, the air thick with anticipation. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, history took a small, quiet step forward. That moment was only the beginning. As the sun dipped lower behind the courthouse windows, no one yet understood that this maid, this woman carrying nothing but a binder of notes and a courage carved from struggle, was about to peel back the walls of a billion-dollar conspiracy. And she would do it piece by piece, the way she had cleaned rooms her whole life. Thorough, patient, and relentless. Later, as the judge announced a short recess to review the unexpected evidence Alana had brought forward, something subtle shifted. People were no longer laughing. Cameras were no longer pointed at Elias. They were pointed at her. The maid who spoke like a lawyer. The woman in the apron who dared to stand where no one expected her to stand. In that room of marble columns and polished wood, Alana stopped being invisible. And the story, our story, quietly unfolded into the kind of truth that only rises when someone refuses to stay silent. Soft night tones begin to settle now as we step into her journey, not with haste, but with the deliberate calm of someone turning a key in a long locked door. Because what happened after that first sentence, "I'll defend him," would change far more than one man's fate. It would change the path of the woman who spoke it. We move gently now into the first part of her fight. When the judge granted temporary permission for Alana to speak, The room didn't simply quiet. It shifted, like old floorboards adjusting beneath unexpected weight. The prosecutor, Sabrina Hale, narrowed her eyes, a professional smile sharpening at the edges. She had prepared her entire opening argument, assuming there would be no defense present. Now, a maid stood where a licensed attorney should have been. Alana stepped behind the defense table. For a brief second, she allowed herself one slow breath, grounding her feet on the polished floor. The binder she carried was faded at the corners, the tabs wrinkled from years of use. She opened it gently, revealing color-coded notes, printed case law, and her own handwriting in soft pencil. She looked up at the judge. "Your Honor, the joint venture revision that the prosecution claims Mr. Carver forged did not originate from him. The digital signature was transmitted from an address located in Geneva. That is not where Mr. Carver was at the time, nor where his corporate devices were logged." A ripple of surprise spread across the courtroom. Even Sabrina's smile faltered. Alana continued, her tone smooth and firm. The contractual language itself is also inconsistent with his company's past negotiations. The phrasing matches legal patterns commonly used in European corporate documents, not American ones. Now there was no laughter, only silence. Sabrina rose, voice clipped. "Your Honor, this woman is not licensed. She is presenting speculative claims." The judge lifted a hand. "I heard her clearly, Ms. Hale, and I will examine the evidence." Elias stared at Alana, confused, perhaps even irritated, but undeniably shaken by what she had just revealed. Alana kept her eyes forward. She had learned long ago never to search for validation from the powerful. Truth, after all, is quiet work. The judge declared a recess until the next morning to allow a full review of the documents. The gavel struck once, echoing through the chamber. Alana closed her binder, hugged it to her chest, and walked out of the courtroom with her back straight. Outside, the evening light washed through the tall windows, casting long shadows on the floor. Her steps were steady, but inside, she felt her pulse thrum with a mixture of fear and purpose. The kind that grows when someone steps into a fight they never planned to start, but cannot walk away from. That night, in her small basement apartment at Jersey Heights, Alana spread her documents across the kitchen table. The room smelled faintly of old tea and detergent. Her apron hung over the back of her chair, a quiet reminder of the life she still held onto while reaching for something larger. She watched a replay of old lectures on legal procedure on her aging laptop, the screen flickering slightly. She compared contract phrasing, reopened digital logs she had stored years ago, and scribbled down more notes until her fingertips smudged with graphite. Just as she leaned back to stretch, her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A voice, low and amused, whispered through the line. "I didn't expect the girl in the apron to turn the room upside down today." Alana's breath caught. "Who is this?" "You're poking a bear," the voice murmured. "Be careful where you point the stick." Then the call ended. She sat in the stillness of her small kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. Fear crept in like a draft beneath the door, but it didn't linger long. She had grown up with fear. She knew how to live alongside it, and she knew how to walk past it. Her fingers returned to the binder. The truth was in these pages. Now she had to prove it. Outside her window, the city lights flickered softly, like quiet encouragement from a world that hadn't yet learned her name. Inside, Alana whispered to the empty room, "I'm not backing down." And the night settled gently around her resolve. Morning light reached the Carver residence with the kind of quiet that usually belonged to days when nothing remarkable was supposed to happen. Yet something had already shifted in the household. Staff whispered in the hallways, their glances lingering longer than usual when Alana Reid walked past. She didn't meet their eyes, not out of rudeness, but because she carried a weight in her hands, her binder. Almost like a fragile truth she was afraid someone might try to take from her. She made her way toward the home office where Elias Carver spent his mornings reviewing reports. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and stale coffee, a blend of wealth and exhaustion. He did not look up when she stepped in. "I didn't call for you," he said without lifting his gaze from the screen. "You also didn't ask to be rescued yesterday," she replied softly. "But here we are." Her tone wasn't disrespectful. It was simply matter of fact, grounded in a reality he could no longer deny. He finally looked at her, eyes narrowing as if searching for the boundaries of her resolve. "You came prepared," he admitted. "I always am," Alana said. "You just never noticed." There was no bitterness in her voice, only quiet truth. Elias exhaled and set the tablet down. For a moment, he looked less like a billionaire and more like a man wrestling with the realization that the ground beneath him had never really been stable. "You said someone is setting me up," he said. "How do you know?" Alana stepped closer and opened her binder, sliding a printed page onto his desk. "Because this revised joint venture document doesn't match any of your previous negotiation styles. And the digital signature, what you might call the hidden trail inside the file, was transmitted from Geneva. You were in Napa that week." He frowned. "I signed documents on the go all the time. My assistant Darren usually prepared everything. I barely skimmed. Sometimes I just glanced, clicked, and forwarded." Alana nodded. "Which means someone had access to your trust and your workflow." Elias leaned back in his chair. "You think Darren forged my signature?" "I think Darren was involved," she answered. "But I don't know if he acted alone." She closed her binder slowly, letting the silence fill the room. It wasn't awkward. It was the kind that comes when two people finally begin to face the same direction. By early afternoon, Alana stood on a noisy midtown sidewalk, staring up at the old co-working building where Darren Cole once rented a space. The elevator creaked on its way up, and the soft hum of fluorescent lights filled the hallway. She found his office easily, the nameplate still attached, though slightly askew. The door was partially open. Her breath tightened. She pushed the door gently. Inside, the room looked as if someone had swept through in a hurry. Papers littered the floor. Drawers hung open. A half-finished cup of coffee sat abandoned, its surface now coated in a thin film. The laptop charger dangled from the wall like a question left unanswered. Someone had been here recently, and urgently. Alana crouched beside the mess of papers, fingertips brushing over the scattered pages. 3 documents caught her eye. They were identical contract drafts, except for one detail: the tiny, nearly invisible information at the bottom, what most people would never notice. One draft listed Geneva as the place of origin. The other listed New Jersey. The third was blank. She held her breath, realizing what it meant. At least one of these documents was tampered with, created to mislead. Maybe all 3 were. Someone had tried to cover their tracks, but hadn't fully succeeded. She snapped photos of everything, noting the details, then tucked the documents into a folder and left quickly, locking the door behind her, as if that would keep the truth from spilling further into the world. Outside, the city buzzed in its usual rhythm. Horns, chatter, the distant rumble of trains. But for Alana, something heavier clung to the air. A sense of being watched, not directly, but from the edges of things. She shook it off and headed back to Jersey Heights. By the time she reached her apartment, the sky had mellowed into deeper shades of gold and pink. She pushed open her door and set her binder on the small kitchen table where she'd done most of her studying. The chair creaked softly as she sat down. This kitchen had become her hidden classroom. Every night since she left law school, she had sat here, listening to old lectures, reading legal rulings, making notes while stirring pots of soup or folding laundry. The walls held the quiet record of her persistence. And now, for the first time, that persistence had touched the outside world. Her phone buzzed. A text message. No name attached. "Careful. You're making powerful people nervous." Her stomach tightened, but she didn't respond. She simply placed the phone face down on the table and returned to her notes. Fear might visit, but she wouldn't let it stay long. There was still too much to uncover. Later that night, after hours of sorting documents and cross-referencing dates, she walked to the window. The lights of the city shimmered, distant but steady, like constellations reflected in glass. Somewhere out there, people were laughing in restaurants, catching trains, living their lives. But here, in this quiet apartment, one woman traced the first threads of a conspiracy that had hoped to crush her employer, and anyone who tried to speak against it. As she stood there, the weight of everything pressed gently against her shoulders. Not crushing, not overwhelming, just steady, like the hand of someone urging her forward. She whispered into the dim room, "This is only the beginning." Then she turned back to the table, reopened her binder, and kept going long into the night. The truth, she knew, did not hide forever. It simply waited for the right pair of eyes to recognize it. Tonight, those eyes were hers. The next morning broke with a pale gray sky, the kind that made New York feel both heavy and wide awake at the same time. Alana Reid stepped out of her building with her binder pressed close to her chest, the strap of her worn bag digging into her shoulder. She barely noticed the cold bite of the air. Her mind was still in Darren's ransacked office, in the scattered papers that told a story someone desperately wished to bury. The subway ride into Manhattan rattled beneath her feet like a slow heartbeat. Each stop brought her closer to the one person she knew could help her decode what she'd found. Toby Grant, her old classmate from Columbia. Toby had always been the kind of person who knew how to find answers, even when the world tried hard to hide them. He now worked at a small investigative newspaper in Queens, the kind of place where stories mattered more than prestige. When she stepped into the diner where they agreed to meet, Toby was already there. He sat in a booth near the window, long fingers wrapped around a coffee mug, his notebook spread open. His glasses caught the light as he looked up. "You look like you walked through a storm," he said. Alana slid into the booth. "In a way, I did." She pulled out the documents she'd found. Toby flipped through each page carefully, reading the fine print details most people would overlook. When he reached the two versions of the contract, one with the Geneva origin marker, the other with the New Jersey marker, he let out a quiet whistle. "This isn't sloppy," he murmured. "This is intentional." She nodded. Someone wanted multiple versions floating around, enough to confuse, enough to frame him. Toby tapped his pen against the Geneva draft. "This Swiss trail, you realize how calculated this is? It didn't just happen. It was designed." "By who?" Alana asked. Toby hesitated before answering. There's a name that keeps resurfacing in cases like this. A man named Victor Langford. He's the general counsel for Titanridge Capital. Alana leaned forward. You've heard of him? Everyone in my field has, Toby said. He's known for shaping reality through paperwork. He doesn't forge signatures himself. He designs the playbook that tells other people how to do it. Alana frowned. So he's the architect. Exactly. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a thin folder. Inside were clipped articles, public records, and fragments of testimony from past employees. Toby lowered his voice. 8 months ago, Victor was involved in another acquisition. A whistleblower tried to expose what was happening. She settled quietly, and then he paused. She died. Accident, they said, but no autopsy was ever released. The diner suddenly felt colder. Why are you telling me this? Alana whispered. Because you're stepping onto a battlefield you can't see. Toby closed the folder. You need to be prepared. Alana absorbed his words slowly, like a weight settling into her chest. She didn't flinch, but something in her eyes sharpened, a quiet resolve. The kind that grows in people who have lived through too much to be easily frightened. She finished her coffee and thanked Toby. As she walked out, she caught her reflection briefly in the diner window. Tired eyes, steady posture. A woman who had stepped into a world she wasn't invited into, yet refused to leave. The city air hit her cheeks as she stepped back onto the sidewalk. She pulled her coat tighter around herself and headed toward the Carver residence. There was someone she needed to confront. Inside the mansion, the warmth felt misplaced. The polished floors, the quiet hum of expensive appliances, everything seemed too calm compared to the truth she now carried. She found Elias Carver in his office again, papers spread around him in controlled chaos. He glanced up, expecting a regular report. You were right, Alana said without preamble. This wasn't just a setup, it's part of something bigger. Elias straightened, the tension in his jaw tightening. Show me. She laid the Geneva-sourced draft in front of him, then the New Jersey version. He traced the bottom of each page slowly, eyes narrowing, disbelief etched into his features. These look identical, he whispered. They're not, Alana said. The tiny trace at the bottom tells the truth. One was created in Europe, one here. Someone wanted interchangeable versions so they could choose whichever story benefited them. Elias rubbed a hand over his face. Darren, I don't think he did this alone, Alana said. But he's connected. I found his planner. There was a code inside, 6047. I believe it points to a storage locker. Elias looked at her, startled. How do you even think of these things? Alana offered a quiet, almost tired smile. Years of looking into corners no one else bothered to look at. She turned to leave, but paused at the door. I'm going to check that locker. I need you to be ready for whatever comes next. Elias murmured, What exactly are we dealing with? She answered without turning back. Someone who believes the law is a weapon. Later that afternoon, Alana stood in a warehouse-like storage facility in Jersey City. The air smelled of concrete and cardboard. Rows of lockers stretched like a narrow maze. She found the one marked with the number from Darren's planner, 6047. The key the receptionist had handed her clicked softly in the lock. Inside was a single manila envelope sealed with a deep red wax symbol. The mark was familiar now, the sweeping carved line forming the letter V, Victor Langford. Her heartbeat slowed. She slipped the envelope into her coat and left quietly, barely breathing as she stepped into the street. When she reached her apartment, she set the envelope on the table with trembling hands. For a moment, she stared at it, remembering her father's voice telling her, "The truth is a locked door, baby girl. But you were born a locksmith." She broke the seal. Inside was a memo addressed to Titanridge's executive board, outlining in cold, clinical language the steps for a hostile contractual acquisition. It described rerouting digital trails, manipulating signature logs, and planting revised clauses to force renegotiation. There was also a financial projection for what they expected to gain, over $31 million in legal leverage value. The memo was dated 8 months before the lawsuit. Alana closed her eyes. This was the story behind the story, the shadow behind the curtain. She printed copies, labeled them, stored them safely. She placed one copy into the hollowed-out book she kept on her shelf. Another went into the freezer behind the frozen vegetables, wrapped in foil just as she had seen in an old documentary about whistleblowers protecting evidence. Hours slipped by like quiet footsteps. When she finally finished, she whispered into the half-lit room, "I'm going to bring this to court." Her phone buzzed once. A new message. Unknown number again. "Walk carefully. You're not invisible anymore." She did not reply. Outside, night crept across the city like a slow-moving tide, but inside her small kitchen, the light stayed on, steady and unblinking, like her resolve. She knew this path had only one direction now. Forward. A soft drizzle coated the city the next morning, turning sidewalks into thin mirrors where traffic lights shimmered in streaks of red and gold. Alana Reid stepped out of her apartment with her coat buttoned high and her binder safely tucked into her bag. The sealed memo she had found in storage locker 6047 weighed on her mind more heavily than anything she had carried before. It wasn't just evidence. It was a confession written in the language of power, cold, polished, and undeniably intentional. She made her way across the damp streets to meet Toby Grant again, this time in a quiet pocket of Queens where the city felt slower, like it had paused to listen. He was waiting for her outside a small newsstand, a rolled-up newspaper under one arm and his scarf blowing lightly in the breeze. "You found the locker," he said by way of greeting, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Toby had that instinct, an ability to read the truth before anyone spoke it. Alana nodded, and the two walked toward a nearby cafe, one with small, fogged-up windows and soft yellow lighting. Inside, the warmth wrapped around them like a blanket. Toby motioned for her to hand him the envelope, and she did, watching his expression shift as he unfolded the memo. "This is worse than I thought," he murmured, scanning line after line. "This isn't just about stealing money. This is about rewriting the rules of a company from the inside out. It's the kind of playbook only someone like Victor Langford could author." He tapped one section gently with his finger. "Look here." He describes how to route digital trails through alternate locations to create the illusion that the signature originated abroad. It's like leaving footprints in sand that was never walked on. Alana gently translated the jargon. So they changed where the file appeared to be signed, not by altering the signature itself, but by manipulating the path it took online. "Exactly," Toby said. "It's brilliant in a ruthless way. Harder to detect, easier to defend." She leaned back in her chair. "But not impossible." "No," Toby agreed. "Not impossible." He handed the envelope back with care, as if it were fragile. "You need to guard this. People who come close to Victor's shadow don't always walk away unchanged." Alana swallowed. She had known fear before, fear of overdue bills, of failing her family, of not being enough. But this was a new kind of fear, one wrapped in silence and expensive suits, a fear that came from people who believed they owned the world and the law that governed it. She left the cafe with Toby's words still lingering in her ears. A taxi took her to Carver residence, where the staff moved with their usual quiet efficiency. But when Alana passed through the front hall, their eyes followed her with something like awe or worry. She wasn't sure which. She found Elias Carver in the garden atrium, sitting on a bench surrounded by tall indoor palms. The place was serene, almost too peaceful for what she was about to say. He glanced up as she approached. "You look like you've seen something," he said. "I have," she replied, settling beside him. She handed him the memo, then watched the realization dawn slowly, heavily, like a cloud blocking out the sun. He traced the wax seal first, then the words inside. His voice grew quiet. Alana, this is evidence of sabotage." "It's more than that," she said softly. "It's proof that this was planned. 8 months before the lawsuit. They budgeted for it. They predicted your collapse. They planned to force you into renegotiations you couldn't refuse." He closed the folder gently, as though his hands needed to remind him not to crush it. "Victor Langford." Alana nodded. "And whoever else stands with him at Titanridge." Elias's breath came slow and steady. "I trusted the wrong people." "You trusted people who looked loyal," Alana said. "The mistake wasn't yours. The betrayal was theirs." He ran a hand through his hair. "So what's the next step?" "We take this to the judge," she said. "But before we do, I need everything you remember about your dealings with Titanridge. Every email, every meeting, every time you felt something was off but ignored it." He let out a hollow laugh. "That might take a while." "We'll take the time," she said. "Building the truth always takes longer than building a lie." They spent the next 3 hours reviewing his old emails, cross-referencing dates with the memo's timeline, searching for gaps, moments where the puzzle pieces didn't quite fit. And the more they looked, the more the shape of the conspiracy came into focus. There were quiet, subtle signs. A message Darren forwarded with no explanation. A clause inserted during a negotiation call that Elias barely remembered. A financial model sent late at night, flagged as urgent, but never discussed again. Little things, small cracks, barely noticeable on their own, but together they formed a pattern. "It was all lined up," Elias murmured. "Every move, every email, every suggestion." Alana felt a small pang of empathy. Wealth did not make a person immune to isolation. In some ways, it made them easier to betray, surrounded by people whose loyalty was rented, not earned. As dusk began to settle, she prepared to leave. But Elias called out softly, "Alana." She turned. "Yes? Why are you doing this?" His voice held something unfamiliar, humility. She answered with the quiet conviction that had carried her since the first day she opened her binder. "Because truth doesn't defend itself. People do." That night, walking home, she sensed someone behind her. The street was mostly empty except for the glow of distant windows and the muffled hum of traffic. She tightened her grip on her bag, her steps steady but alert. Then, just as she reached the corner, a car slowed beside her. A sleek black sedan, its windows tinted. Her pulse sharpened. The passenger window rolled down an inch. A familiar voice drifted out. Calm, cold, almost bored. "Ms. Reid, you're wandering too close to a line you cannot uncross." It was Mr. Thorne. Alana didn't stop walking. And you're speaking to someone who's tired of being stepped on. You think you're ready for what comes next? I don't need to be ready, she said. I just need to be right. He chuckled softly, a sound without warmth. Then may your strength match your ambition. The window slid shut. The car drifted away like a dark thought sliding back into the shadows. Alana stood still for a moment, letting the night breathe around her. Fear tried to whisper, but her resolve whispered louder. This wasn't just her fight now. It was a fight for anyone who had ever been silenced by someone wealthier, louder, or more powerful. She walked home with steady steps, the city stretching around her like a quiet witness. Tomorrow, she would prepare for the next hearing. Tomorrow, she would bring the Geneva memo into the light. Tonight, she kept the lamp burning, proof that she had not turned away. The next morning unfolded with a brightness that felt almost dishonest, as if the sun had chosen to pretend nothing dangerous was stirring beneath the city's surface. Alana Reid walked through her small apartment, gathering the copies of the Geneva memo she had hidden the night before. One tucked behind her books, one wrapped in foil in the freezer, one in the lining of her coat. Each copy was a lifeline, not for herself, but for the truth she intended to carry into the courthouse in the coming days. She buttoned her coat and stepped into the hallway. Something felt wrong before she even reached her door. A subtle shift in the air. A hush in the building that wasn't natural. She placed her hand on the knob, turned it, and pushed. Her breath caught. Her living room was not as she'd left it. Nothing was stolen. Not the television, not the laptop, not the envelope she kept in the hollowed-out book. But her papers, her notes, her research, her timelines, lay scattered across the floor like leaves caught in a storm. Her binder had been opened, pages moved, rearranged in a way that felt deliberate. A quiet message. Someone had been here. The air still held the faint scent of someone else's cologne, something sharp and expensive. It made her skin prickle. Alana crouched slowly, touching the edges of her documents as gently as if comforting a wounded friend. Whoever entered didn't want her belongings. They wanted her certainty to tremble. They wanted her to doubt her own safety, to question whether the fight she had begun was worth continuing. She closed her eyes and breathed out slowly. "I hear you," she whispered into the silence, "but I'm still going." She gathered her papers, placed them back into the binder, and secured the locks on the door with care. When she stepped outside again, her steps were even steadier than before. Later that afternoon, Alana found herself in Battery Park, where the wind carried the briny scent of the harbor and gulls circled lazily above the water. She often came here when she needed a moment of clarity. Today, however, she wasn't alone. Elias Carver stood near the railing, hands in his pockets, staring out at the waves. His polished shoes looked strangely out of place on the worn stone path. When he heard her approach, he didn't turn right away. "They told me to keep a low profile," he said quietly. "It's strange to be a billionaire and have nowhere safe to stand." "There's safety in the truth," Alana replied, standing beside him. "But it doesn't come quickly, or quietly." He finally looked at her. There were shadows beneath his eyes, the kind that form when a person's world becomes suddenly unfamiliar. "I keep thinking," he murmured, "that everything could collapse any minute. My company, my reputation, years of work undone by people I trusted." Alana rested her binder against her hip. People don't betray you because you're weak. They betray you because they believe you won't see it coming. He huffed out a humorless breath. And I didn't. Well, she said gently, you do now. They walked for a moment along the waterfront, the city skyline shimmering through a thin veil of mist. Elias spoke again, softer this time. When I saw you in the courtroom yesterday, I honestly thought you were out of your depth. I was, Alana said. But stepping into deep water doesn't mean a person can't swim. Sometimes it just means no one thought to ask if she could. He nodded, as though absorbing a lesson he should have learned a long time ago. You've risked everything for this. Not everything, she corrected. Just enough. She didn't elaborate, but the truth hovered between them. The long nights studying in her kitchen, the sacrifices her family never knew about, the countless small choices that had quietly shaped her into someone capable of standing in a courtroom with nothing but a binder and a steady voice. After a quiet moment, Elias asked, "Have you told anyone else what you found?" "A journalist friend," she said. "Someone I trust, and I've made copies of everything. If something happens to me, the truth won't disappear." He closed his eyes briefly. Gratitude flashed across his face, raw, unguarded. "You shouldn't have to do this alone," he said. "Maybe not," she replied. "But I know how to stand on my own feet. That's the one advantage a maid has over a billionaire. She's never expected anyone to catch her when she falls." The wind curled around them, carrying her words gently into the open space. As they parted ways, Alana headed toward a quiet street lined with narrow shops and small restaurants. She stopped by a corner bodega owned by a man named Mr. Alvarez, who always greeted her like family. "Long day?" he asked as she entered. "Longer every minute," she answered with a tired smile. He poured her a cup of tea without asking and set it in front of her. "I saw you on the news," he said, his voice low but proud. "The way you stood up for that man, that took courage. Not everyone has that." Alana wrapped her hands around the warm cup, letting the heat steady her. "Courage is just fear with better posture," she murmured. Mr. Alvarez chuckled. "Maybe so, but not everyone knows how to stand upright." She took the tea to go and continued her walk home, the steady warmth grounding her as she passed storefronts and blinking streetlights. The city seemed to watch her, as if waiting to see what she would do next. When she reached her building, she paused at the door. The earlier violation of her apartment still lingered in her mind, like a faint echo. But she unlocked the door anyway, stepped inside, and turned on the lamp. The golden light filled the small room, settling softly across her papers. She sat at her kitchen table, her classroom, her refuge, and opened her binder again. Page after page lay before her, waiting for her next move. And though the world outside pulsed with threats, the quiet inside her home felt stronger. She picked up her pen. She wasn't finished. The courthouse felt different that morning. Not louder, not busier, just more alert, like a living thing sensing the shift of pressure before a storm. Alana Reid stepped through the tall glass doors with her binder clutched against her coat. Reporters turned, recognizing her now, their murmurs forming a soft ripple that followed her across the marble floor. She heard none of it. Her mind was already in the courtroom. Inside, Elias Carver sat at the defense table, shoulders straight but eyes shadowed from a night without rest. When he saw Alana approach, something unspoken passed between them. Not trust yet, not friendship, but a fragile understanding that they were walking into this fire together. The judge entered. The room rose. Chairs creaked softly as everyone sat again. Before the prosecutor could speak, the judge gestured to Alana. "Ms. Reid," he said, You may continue your submission." A subtle wave of disbelief moved through the gallery. The idea of a maid presenting evidence in a federal hearing was still more than most could process. But Alana rose calmly, placed her binder on the lectern, and let the silence settle before she began. "Your Honor," she said, "today I present documentation showing that the joint venture revision at the center of this case did not originate from Mr. Carver's systems or locations. The digital path, what I will describe in everyday terms as the trail left behind when a document is created and sent, points to an address in Geneva." The judge leaned forward. "You are certain of this?" "Yes," she replied, "and I have independent verification." She gestured to the table behind her, where 4 forensic analysts sat, each prepared to testify. They were not flashy people. They were quiet, meticulous specialists who spent years reading the invisible language stored inside files. Their presence alone shifted the weight in the room. The prosecutor, Sabrina Hale, rose sharply. "Your Honor, I must object. These so-called experts—" "They are certified analysts," Alana interrupted in a level tone. "Each has examined the document's hidden markers of origin. All of them reached the same conclusion." Her voice did not waver. She did not raise it. She didn't need to. Alana handed copies of the Geneva draft, the New Jersey draft, and the memo from Victor Langford to the court clerk. As they were passed to the bench, the judge's eyebrows twitched at the sight of the memo's clinical instructions. How to redirect digital trails, how to prepare altered clauses, how to force renegotiations through strategic legal pressure. He read silently for a long moment, the courtroom still as breath. Finally, he looked up. "Ms. Hale, do you have an explanation for this document?" Sabrina smiled the kind of smile that hoped charm could soften truth. "Out of context, Your Honor. Anyone could have—" The judge tapped the memo lightly with his index finger. "This is more than context. This is intent." A soft gasp shivered through the room. Even Elias flinched slightly, as if hearing his own vindication for the first time. Alana wasn't finished. She stepped back to the lectern. "Your Honor, this memo was written 8 months before Titanridge Capital filed its complaint against Mr. Carver. It includes financial forecasts for what they expected to gain from the lawsuit, what they called legal leverage value, exceeding $31 million. She paused, letting that sink in. This wasn't a response to wrongdoing. This was preparation for sabotage. Sabrina attempted to object again, but her voice didn't have its previous strength. The courtroom wasn't with her anymore. When the judge allowed the analysts to testify, each one calmly explained their findings in plain language. They described the breadcrumbs left inside digital files, the way a file remembers where it came from, where it traveled, how it was altered. Their explanations were easy to follow, even for those unfamiliar with technology. They spoke like teachers who wanted truth to be understood, not like experts trying to impress. By the time the last analyst finished, a quiet realization filled the courtroom like a slow-moving tide. This was never about Elias Carver forging documents. It was about Titanridge forging a trap. Sabrina attempted one last maneuver. "Your Honor, the prosecution requests additional time to analyze these claims." "Denied," the judge said softly. "You have presented no credible rebuttal." For the first time since the trial began, Sabrina Hale appeared uncertain, her confidence fractured. Alana returned to her seat. Elias leaned toward her, whispering, "How did you even find all this?" "By looking where nobody else wanted to look," she murmured. The judge called a brief recess. As people rose from their seats, a wave of murmurs rushed through the gallery. Some reporters hurried out to make calls. Others simply stared at Alana with newfound respect, as if she were someone they were seeing clearly for the first time. She gathered her binder and walked out of the courtroom. Elias followed a few steps behind, though he gave her space. She needed the moment more than he did. In the corridor, she found a quiet corner near a large window overlooking the courthouse plaza. Outside, the crowd of onlookers had grown. A camera crew stood ready. The case was becoming bigger than a corporate dispute. It had become a story, a human one. Elias reached her side. "You changed the temperature in that room," he said quietly. "I didn't change anything," she replied. "I just held the truth long enough for someone to look at it." She watched people flowing across the plaza, lawyers, reporters, ordinary citizens, life moving, unaware of the storm gathering behind the courthouse walls. "Do you think it's enough?" Elias asked. "Not yet," she said softly, "but it's the first real step." As they walked back toward the courtroom doors for the next phase of the hearing, a sense of forward motion settled around them. Like a current, they had no choice but to follow. Alana inhaled deeply, her binder warm beneath her hand. She had spoken. The court had listened. And Titanridge's carefully crafted walls had begun to crack. The truth had a voice now, and for the first time in years, it was being heard. Rain tapped lightly against the courthouse windows that evening, the kind of thin silver rain that softened the city's edges and made every light blur into a gentle glow. Alana Reid walked out of the courtroom with her binder pressed close, her mind still replaying the judge's expression as he read the Geneva memo. Shock, disbelief. Then something heavier, an unspoken recognition that an entire case may have been built on sand. Outside, the plaza buzzed with reporters, microphones, raised like restless birds. But Alana slipped past them, keeping her head low and her steps steady. The truth was loud enough already. She didn't need to amplify it with noise. She was halfway down the courthouse steps when someone called her name. "Ms. Reid?" A young woman stood just beyond the railing, coat pulled tight around her. Her umbrella trembled slightly in her hand, not from the rain, but from nerves. She had the kind of eyes that avoided direct contact, darting around as if afraid the shadows themselves might overhear her. I'm Marion Blake," she said quietly. Alana recognized the name immediately. Marion was a junior associate at Titanridge, the kind of employee whose job was to draft documents without asking too many questions. Alana motioned for her to follow her to a quieter area near a stand of trees, where the noise of the plaza faded into a soft rustle of leaves. "What's wrong?" Alana asked. Marion swallowed hard. Everything. She opened her bag with trembling hands and pulled out a small stack of printed emails. The pages looked worn from being folded and unfolded too many times. "I can't keep quiet," she whispered. "Not anymore." Alana took the papers gently. "Tell me what you know." Marion's voice shook, but she forced herself to continue. "Those digital trails you mentioned, the ones pointing to Geneva, I altered the timestamps. I was told to reroute the path so the file looked like it came from somewhere it never touched." "And who told you to do that?" Alana asked softly. "Victor Langford," she said, barely above a whisper. "He said it was necessary, that it was standard practice, that someone like me shouldn't question the bigger picture." She pressed a hand to her forehead. "I believed him. I needed the job. My father's dry cleaning shop was losing money, and I thought doing what I was told would keep my position safe. Alana rested a hand on the railing beside them, letting the moment breathe. You're not the villain here, Marion. You were pressured, manipulated. You're stepping forward now. That's what matters. A soft sob escaped Marion, but she caught it quickly. It won't matter if they silence me. Then we make sure they can't, Alana said. She guided Marion toward a quiet bench where the rain fell in a thin mist around them. Marion took a shaky breath and continued. 8 months ago, before the lawsuit, Victor called a meeting. He said Titanridge was planning to push Mr. Carver into a renegotiation he couldn't refuse. He said the documents would fall into place if we followed instructions. She paused, glancing around nervously. He talked about creating pressure points, false inconsistencies, misaligned clauses. I didn't understand all of it, but I knew it wasn't right. Alana listened with complete stillness. Each piece fit perfectly with what she had uncovered. The Geneva, memo, the digital trails, the altered drafts. All of it had a face now. Not a theory, not a shadow, but a human whose conscience had finally pushed through fear. I'll testify, Marion said suddenly, surprising even herself. I have to. I can't keep living like this. Every day at that firm feels like drowning. Alana reached out and took Marion's hand, grounding her. You won't drown, not as long as you stay in the light. Marion nodded weakly, but her eyes carried a spark, a fragile one, but real. A few moments later, the two parted ways. Alana watched Marion walk toward a waiting rideshare car, head ducked against the rain. She seemed small against the city, but her choice was enormous. It shifted something invisible, like a weight sliding off an old foundation. Alana made her way to the subway, but as she approached the entrance, she saw the glow of flashing lights ahead, blue, white, and jarring against the rainy evening. Her steps slowed. A storefront window had shattered, glass scattered across the sidewalk. Yellow tape fluttered in the wind. A police officer knelt near a fallen display rack, a flashlight sweeping the debris. Alana's stomach sank. She recognized the sign above the door. Blake's Dry Cleaning, Marion's father's shop. She stepped closer, her pulse tightening, as if her body already knew what her eyes were about to see. Mr. Blake stood near the entrance, arms crossed tightly, trying to hide the tremor in his hands. A deep cut marked his forehead, not serious but painful looking. Mr. Blake, Alana called softly as she approached. He turned toward her, his expression toughened by years of work, but cracked now with fear. They told me to tell my daughter to keep quiet, he said, voice rough. I didn't even know she was involved in anything. Alana spotted the note taped to the shattered display. The writing was jagged, hurried, as though meant to be recognized rather than understood. Silence is survival. Her jaw tightened. It wasn't just a threat. It was a signature, a message from Titanridge's darker corners. Mr. Blake swayed slightly, and Alana moved to steady him. I'm calling someone who can help, she said gently. Marion won't be alone. Neither will you. He nodded, though his eyes glistened with helplessness. She's a good girl. She didn't deserve this. No one deserves this, Alana replied. As police continued their work, she stepped back and sent a message to Marion, telling her to go somewhere safe for the night. Then she contacted a public defender she knew who often assisted in cases involving whistleblower protection. Her hands shook slightly as she typed, not from fear for herself, but from the growing realization that this fight wasn't just about documents or courtrooms anymore. It was about people, ordinary people whose livelihoods could be shattered in minutes. On her way back home, the city lights felt harsher, slicing through the darkness. Her coat clung damply to her shoulders, but she kept walking, feeling every raindrop as a reminder that justice did not fall cleanly. It pooled, it soaked, it seeped into every corner of the world, even the ones too small for anyone else to notice. She reached her apartment and placed her binder on the table. This wasn't just about defending Elias Carver anymore. This was about defending every person Titanridge had crushed under the weight of their power. Alana lit her small table lamp, the warm glow filling the room with a steady, almost defiant calm. "They can break windows," she whispered, "but they can't break the truth." And as the rain continued tapping gently against the glass, she prepared for the next hearing, now carrying not just evidence, but the voice of a woman brave enough to step into the light. Morning came with a sky washed pale by the night's rain, the buildings glistening as if the city itself had been scrubbed clean. Yet beneath that brightness, a tension still simmered. Alana Reid stepped out of her apartment with a renewed steadiness in her stride. The broken glass at Mr. Blake's shop still haunted her mind, but it had also sharpened her resolve. Courage, she realized, often took the shape of ordinary people refusing to bow their heads. Today, she wouldn't simply defend evidence in court. Today, she would reveal the truth in a way no corporation could spin or silence. When she reached the courthouse plaza, she saw the crowd long before she heard it. Reporters stood clustered like flocks of birds, adjusting camera angles and whispering into microphones. Onlookers pressed behind barriers, their faces brimming with curiosity and something else: quiet hope. Elias Carver, normally a man who moved through the world with polished detachment, stood at the center of it all, looking strangely exposed. His suit was immaculate, but his eyes carried an unguarded heaviness, as though the weight of betrayal had finally settled into his bones. When he saw Alana approaching, he stepped toward her, shoulders straightening. "You ready?" he asked. "As ready as truth ever is," she said. He gave a small nod. "Then let's make it heard." Together, they walked toward the temporary podium set up beneath the courthouse steps. The rain had cleared, leaving the stone steps glossy and reflective. A cluster of microphones waited, each one aimed at the small patch of space where Alana would stand. A murmur moved through the crowd as she approached. Some recognized her. Others whispered her name like a rumor they weren't sure they believed. The maid who dared to speak. The woman in the apron who stood against Titanridge. The voice the courtroom hadn't expected. Alana didn't raise her hands or clear her throat. She simply stepped forward, her binder held with both palms, and let the quiet stretch long enough for people to truly settle. When she spoke, her voice carried not with volume but with unmistakable clarity. 2 weeks ago, I stood in a courtroom where no one expected me to speak, she began. Today, I stand here because silence has harmed too many people for too long. The cameras clicked, capturing each word. Her face remained calm, but there was a fire in her eyes. A controlled flame, measured but undeniable. I have submitted evidence showing that the documents used to accuse Mr. Carver were not created by him, she continued. They were engineered, guided, designed to mislead. This was not a mistake. It was a system built to exploit the trust placed in it. She held up the memo, the Geneva packet, without revealing its contents, only its significance. "This," she said, "is the instruction manual outlining how to manipulate the truth through paperwork. It describes in plain language how to reroute a document's trail so it seems to come from somewhere it never touched. It explains how to insert clauses quietly, how to create pressure without leaving obvious traces. It shows planning, intention, malice. A rustle moved through the journalists. They were listening not out of obligation, but out of genuine disbelief at what she was revealing. Power built on lies should never stand, Alana said. Power used to crush people should never be allowed to thrive. She lowered the memo and took a slow breath. I didn't come forward to defend a billionaire. I came forward because someone shaped a weapon out of the law itself. And if they could do it to him, they could do it to anyone. Workers, families, small business owners, any person who doesn't have the resources to fight back. A hush spread across the plaza like a wave. Alana glanced at the cameras. I will present every piece of evidence to the court. I will speak for those who are too afraid to come forward. But I need you, those listening, to understand something important. She paused, letting her next words settle with gentle weight. Justice isn't found in courtrooms alone. It begins in kitchens, back rooms, break rooms, laundry shops, and quiet corners. Places where people like me work, places no one expects truth to rise from. A photographer's flash popped like a heartbeat. And yet, Alana continued, truth rises every time someone refuses to look away. The crowd breathed in collectively, some nodding, some whispering to the person beside them. For a moment, the city seemed to stand still. Elias stepped forward then, not to overshadow her, but to affirm her. I trusted the wrong people, he said, his voice low. And it nearly destroyed everything I built. But this woman, he gestured to Alana, saw what no one else saw, and she refused to let the truth be buried. He turned to her with something close to gratitude. You didn't just defend me, you defended what's right. The microphones buzzed with that declaration. Journalists leaned forward, sensing the shift. This story was no longer about a billionaire under fire. It was about the woman who dismantled the flames. As the crowd continued buzzing, a single photograph captured the moment. Alana standing at the podium, the courthouse towering behind her, binder in hand, rain-damp steps gleaming at her feet. Her hair slightly tousled by the breeze, her eyes steady. That image would soon travel across the city, then across the country. People would share it with captions like, "The maid who spoke truth to power." Courage has no uniform. She didn't wait for permission. But for now, it lived only in this moment, a quiet rebellion against the machinery of a corporation that believed itself untouchable. Alana stepped away from the microphones. Elias walked beside her, a respectful distance that acknowledged both solidarity and her independence. You're making enemies, he murmured as they reached the courthouse doors again. They started it, she replied softly. And you should know, he added. You're also making allies. She glanced at him, a small flicker of warmth crossing her expression. Allies aren't what I came for. No, he said, but they're what you've earned. The courthouse doors opened, flooding them with a cool blast of air conditioning, and the two stepped inside. The next hearing awaited. Titanridge had not yet fallen, but its walls were shaking, and Alana was ready to push. The courthouse felt heavier than usual when Alana Reid stepped inside the following morning, as though the building itself had absorbed everything that had happened. The threats, the lies, the rain-softened truths now rising from the ground. The marble floors gleamed under the fluorescent lights, but the air carried a subtle tension, the kind that settles over a room before something irreversible occurs. She walked toward the defense table with her binder pressed against her side. Elias Carver was already seated, his hands clasped in front of him, shoulders tight with anticipation. He looked up as she arrived, and though he didn't smile, there was acknowledgement in his gaze, a quiet gratitude, the kind that didn't need words. "Ready?" he asked. Alana nodded. "The truth is," when the judge entered, everyone stood. He took his seat, adjusted his glasses, and cleared his throat. Today was the evidentiary hearing, an opportunity for both sides to present the deepest layers of their case. Sabrina Hale, Titanridge's prosecutor, looked more polished than ever. But Alana noticed something beneath her surface: stiffness in her posture, a clipped breath. Pressure had begun to crack the veneer. "Ms. Reid," the judge said, "you may begin." Alana stood, the room falling into a hush that felt almost reverent. She opened her binder, each page a step toward the truth she'd fought to protect. "Your Honor," she began, "today I will submit a chain of communications, demonstrating that Titanridge Capital orchestrated a strategy to undermine Mr. Carver through deliberate manipulation of documents and digital pathways." She walked toward the large projector, placing the first exhibit on the screen. A thread of emails from Titanridge's upper executives appeared. Dates, names, short but telling messages. One line written by a board member read, "Carver won't see it coming. Make sure Darren handles the signature trail." A murmur spread across the courtroom like a rustle of wind. Alana continued, her voice steady. "This correspondence predates the lawsuit by 8 months. It outlines a plan to capitalize on a hostile renegotiation, using what they called pressure points to force compliance." Sabrina rose abruptly. "Your Honor, these emails are incomplete." "They are intact," Alana said calmly, "and the metadata confirms their authenticity." She paused, offering an explanation for the court. "By metadata, I mean the quiet record inside each digital file, the hidden notes that show when it was created, where it traveled, and whether it was altered. Think of it as the footprints a document leaves behind. These footprints match perfectly with Titanridge's internal servers." The judge nodded slowly, absorbing her explanation. Alana placed the next exhibit on the screen. The Geneva memo, the sealed instructions describing how to reroute digital trails, adjust clauses, and pressure Carver through false signatures. "This memo," she said, "uses straightforward directives. It explains how to create a document that appears signed abroad without touching the signer's hands. It describes steps to adjust the contract language to resemble European drafting, making the fraud seem plausible." Sabrina's voice rose. "This is a gross misinterpretation." The judge raised a hand. "Sit down, Ms. Hale." Sabrina froze, her jaw tightening. "And now," Alana said, "the testimony of someone who lived this process." The doors at the back of the courtroom opened. Marion Blake stepped in. She walked slowly, shoulders trembling slightly, her hands folded against her stomach as though holding herself together. The room seemed to breathe with her movement. She reached the witness stand, took the oath, and settled into the chair, her eyes darting briefly toward Alana. Alana gave her a quiet nod, an anchor. "Miss Blake," Alana said gently, "please tell the court what you were asked to do." Marion swallowed. Her voice came out soft, but steady enough for everyone to hear. "I adjusted the timestamps," she said. "Victor Langford told me to. He said the file needed to appear as if it came from another location. I didn't know everything at first. I was told not to ask questions." "And did you alter anything else?" Alana asked, her tone patient. "Yes." Marion took a shaky breath. I changed the background information inside the file, the tiny details that show where it originated. I redirected its path so it looked like it came from Geneva. A collective intake of breath filled the room. Marion continued. We had meetings about it, always behind closed doors. Victor said it was just business, that powerful people needed guidance, that the details didn't matter as long as the outcome was profitable. What made you come forward now? Alana asked. Marion's eyes glistened. Because it stopped being business when my father's store was attacked. Because silence shouldn't cost someone their life. Her voice cracked on the last word. Alana stepped a little closer. And do you have reason to believe Titanridge was responsible for that intimidation? Marion nodded. The note said to keep quiet. It happened the same night I decided to leave the firm. The judge leaned back, his expression shifting from concern to something heavier, an anger bridled by duty. Sabrina rose one more time, her voice trembling despite her attempt to remain composed. Your Honor, this testimony is emotional, but it doesn't prove... It proves intent, the judge said firmly, and it corroborates the evidence submitted. Sabrina stared at him, stunned. Alana took a breath, letting the silence settle before presenting the final point. Your Honor, she said, I request that the case against Mr. Carver be dismissed in full, and that all evidence pertaining to the conduct of Titanridge Capital and its executives be forwarded to federal investigators. The judge didn't hesitate. Motion granted, he said. This case is dismissed. Furthermore, all materials will be referred to the U.S. Attorney's Office for criminal review. For a moment, the courtroom was utterly silent. Then a wave of energy surged. Reporters scrambling, whispers rising, people exhaling the breath they'd been holding for weeks. Elias slumped back in his chair, a weight lifting from him so visibly it was as though a physical chain had snapped. Alana closed her binder, her fingers trembling faintly. Not with fear this time, but with something softer, relief edged with exhaustion. Elias turned to her. You saved my life, he said quietly. Not just my company, me. Alana shook her head. I didn't save you. I let the truth speak. Elias exhaled, eyes dampened by a mixture of gratitude and humility. No one else would have done this. Alana looked toward Marion, still seated in the witness stand, tears glistening on her cheeks. Not alone, she replied. As they stepped outside into the crisp, bright light, the crowd erupted. Questions flying, cameras flashing, voices rising. But through the noise, Alana felt a strange calm settle over her. Like the eye of a storm, she had brought the truth into the sun, and the walls that once seemed untouchable had finally begun to crumble. 18 months passed, quietly at first, then all at once. New York moved on in the way cities always do, absorbing old stories into new ones, washing over scandal with the daily rhythm of life, letting headlines fade into memory. But for Alana Reid, the world never entirely returned to what it had been before the trial. It couldn't. Something inside her had been reshaped, steadied, strengthened, awakened. On a mild spring evening, sunlight spilled across the quiet street where a converted community space now overlooked a small park. The building was modest, just 3 stories. Its brick walls softened by age and painted with a wide mural of upraised hands reaching toward a single word: justice. Beneath it, smaller letters read, "The People's Law Project, free legal guidance for every worker." Inside, volunteers moved between folding tables covered with leaflets, translated forms, and small stacks of notebooks. Some wore name tags, Others simply offered warm smiles to the people waiting. Custodians, delivery drivers, nannies, line cooks, cashiers. Many had never set foot in a legal office in their lives. A gentle hum of conversation filled the room, the kind of noise that felt alive but peaceful. It was the sound of people who finally believed they were allowed to ask questions. At the center of it all stood Alana, organizing intake files at a long wooden desk. Her hair was tied back loosely, her clothes simple, her binder never far from reach. She watched the volunteers, now 32 in number, spread across 5 satellite offices, helping people fill out forms, offering explanations, listening with patience. Each office had grown from the same seed, the idea that truth didn't belong to corporations or wealthy law firms. Truth belonged to everyone, and so did justice. A soft laugh behind her stirred the air. She turned to see Elias Carver leaning against the doorway, hands in his pockets. He looked different now, still wealthy, still polished, but less guarded. There was a humility in his posture that wasn't there before, a lightness too, as if shedding the weight of Titanridge's deception had allowed him to breathe freely again. "I thought your meeting ended an hour ago," Alana said, raising an eyebrow. "It did," Elias replied. "But I figured I'd come see how things were going here. You've built something impressive." "I didn't build it alone," she said. "A lot of people stepped up." He nodded, glancing around the room. "You know, sometimes I wish I had discovered this place when I was younger. Might have made me a better man sooner." Alana smiled gently. "You found your way when it mattered." "And you?" he asked. "Did you ever think your life would look like this?" Her eyes softened. "No, I thought my place would always be in the background, cleaning up after other people's choices. But somewhere along the way, I realized that the only thing separating silence from a voice is the moment you choose to speak." Elias studied her for a moment. "You changed more than one person's life, mine included." She didn't respond to the compliment. She didn't need to. Gratitude, she had learned, didn't always need to be acknowledged out loud. Sometimes it was felt simply by standing in the same room with someone whose journey you helped redirect. Just then, the door swung open, letting in a stream of evening air. A woman hurried inside, carrying a tote bag and breathing unevenly as if she'd rushed to get here before closing. "Excuse me," she said, her voice shaky. I need help." Alana approached her with a calm, steady presence. "Of course," she said. "I'm Alana. Tell me what's going on." The woman swallowed hard. "My name is Ruthie Barnes. I work at a hotel in Midtown, and today I saw something I don't think I was supposed to see." Alana's expression softened. "Take a breath. You're safe here." Ruthie nodded, clutching her tote bag. "I tried to tell my supervisor. They told me to forget it, to act like I didn't see anything, but I can't. It feels wrong." Many people had walked through this space with those same words. It feels wrong, and every time, it reminded Alana why she'd started this work. She gestured toward a chair. "Sit with me," she said. "Tell me everything from the beginning." Ruthie hesitated, then lowered herself into the seat, her fingers twisting around the tote straps. Alana pulled out a fresh intake form, but she didn't open it right away. Instead, she met Ruthie's gaze. "You did the right thing coming here," Alana said softly. Ruthie blinked back grateful tears. "I wasn't sure anyone would listen." Alana smiled, that warm, steady smile she'd given so many people before. "I'll listen, and we'll figure out what you saw and what it means." Elias lingered in the doorway, watching the scene unfold with quiet admiration. He had once been the man she defended. Now he was only an observer in the movement she led, a witness to the legacy born from the courtroom's shadows. As the room settled into a calm lull of conversation, the mural outside caught the last glow of sunset. Its colors deepened, the hands reaching upward, the word justice glowing softly as if lit from within. Alana guided Ruthie gently, her voice low, her presence steady. She no longer needed a courtroom to defend someone. She no longer needed permission to speak. She had built something stronger than a verdict. She had built a place where the unseen could finally be seen. A place where silence had an alternative. A place where truth could breathe. The People's Law Project was not the end of her story. It was the beginning of many others. And as the evening closed in, Alana bent over the intake form, listening with the patience of someone who had walked through fire and come out carrying a light she fully intended to share.